Let me paint you a picture. It's the 27th of the month. You checked your bank account this morning and felt that familiar tightening in your chest. Not panic. You've been here before. Just that low, dull weight of wondering where it all went. You got paid 2 weeks ago. You didn't go on vacation. You didn't buy anything crazy. You just lived. And somehow, living cost everything you had. You tell yourself you're just not earning enough. That if you could just get one raise, one break, one better opportunity, everything would click into place. And maybe that's partially true. But here's what nobody wants to say out loud. For a lot of people watching this right now, the income isn't the main problem. The behavior is. That's not an insult. That's actually the most empowering thing I can tell you. Because behavior is something you can change starting today. A salary increase from your employer requires their cooperation. Your next decision only requires yours. So let's talk about the 7 money mistakes that are quietly bleeding people dry. Not because they're irresponsible or reckless, but because nobody ever sat them down and explained how money actually works in the real world. Mistake number 1 is treating your take-home pay like your actual budget. Most people know their salary. Almost nobody knows their real hourly rate after taxes, commuting costs, work clothes, lunches, and the mental recovery time that job demands from them. There's a concept economists call the real wage, what your labor is actually worth to you after all the friction costs of earning it. When you do that math honestly, a lot of people discover they're making significantly less per usable hour than they thought. And when you don't know your real number, you make spending decisions based on a fantasy version of your income. You feel richer than you are on payday and poorer than you should be by the end of the month. Start there. Know your actual number. Mistake number 2 is confusing lifestyle inflation with progress. Here's a pattern that plays out constantly. Someone gets a raise, a promotion, or a new job. Within 6 months, their expenses have grown to match or exceed the new income. A nicer apartment, a car payment, subscriptions that felt justified at the new income level. This is called lifestyle inflation, and it is one of the most effective wealth destroyers on the planet, precisely because it feels like the opposite of destruction. It feels like reward. You worked hard. You earned this. But what you've actually done is reset your baseline, made your new normal more expensive to maintain, and ensured that a layoff, a health crisis, or any interruption to your income hits harder than it ever did before. Progress means the gap between what you earn and what you spend is growing. If that gap is the same or smaller than it was 2 years ago despite earning more, that's not progress, that's a treadmill. Mistake number 3 is keeping money in accounts that quietly steal from you. Right now, the average savings account at a major traditional bank in the United States pays somewhere around 0.01 to 0.5% annual interest. Meanwhile, over the past few years, inflation has run significantly higher than that. What that means in practice is that money sitting in a traditional savings account is losing purchasing power in real terms every single year. It feels safe because the number doesn't go down, but the number is lying to you. High-yield savings accounts, money market accounts, and short-term treasury products have all been paying meaningfully higher rates in recent years, some above 4%, and yet surveys consistently show that tens of millions of people still keep their emergency funds and short-term savings in accounts earning almost nothing. This isn't about getting rich from interest. It's about stopping a leak that's been draining you without making a sound. Mistake number 4 is the one that sounds boring but is costing people more than anything else. Not having a clear system for money before it arrives. When your paycheck hits your account as one lump sum with no pre-decided destination, you're essentially leaving every financial decision to future you, who is tired, distracted, and surrounded by things that want to be bought. The psychology here is important. Decision fatigue is real. Research in behavioral economics has consistently shown that people make worse financial choices when they have to make those choices repeatedly under conditions of stress and cognitive load. The solution isn't willpower, it's architecture. People who automate savings transfers on payday, even small ones, before they ever touch the money, Consistently save more than people with higher incomes who try to save whatever's left at the end of the month. Because there is almost never anything left at the end of the month, the system has to come first. Mistake number 5 is underestimating the compounding cost of debt while overestimating the reward of spending. Credit card debt in the United States currently carries average interest rates somewhere in the range of 20 to 28% annually, depending on the card. Think about what that means. If you carry a $3,000 balance at 22% interest and only pay the minimum, you will pay back significantly more than you borrowed over time, often taking years to clear. Meanwhile, many people with balances like that are also putting money into low-yield savings or spending on things that depreciate immediately. The psychological trap is that paying off debt feels less satisfying than buying something. Debt payoff is invisible. Nobody sees it. Nobody congratulates you. But the math is merciless. Paying off 22% debt is the equivalent of earning a guaranteed 22% return on your money, something almost no investment on earth can reliably promise you. Treating debt elimination as your highest return investment is not a sacrifice. It's one of the smartest financial moves available to ordinary people. Mistake number 6 is avoiding investing because it feels too risky, while ignoring the risk of not investing at all. This one is everywhere right now. You can find it in Reddit threads, in comment sections, in conversations at every dinner table. People who lived through the volatility of recent markets, the pandemic crash, the 2022 drawdown, the interest rate chaos, and concluded that the stock market is a casino and they want no part of it. That feeling is human and understandable. But here's what that logic misses. Not investing is also a risk. It's just a quieter one. The risk of not investing is that 30 years from now, you have exactly what you saved in nominal dollars, which, in real purchasing power terms, will be a fraction of what it feels like today. Broad index fund investing over long time horizons has historically been one of the most reliable wealth-building tools available to regular people. Not because markets never fall, but because, over long periods, they have consistently recovered and grown. The question isn't whether investing has risk. Everything has risk. The question is which risk you'd rather take, the volatility of the market or the certainty of inflation quietly dissolving your savings over decades. Mistake number 7 is spending money to manage emotions rather than to build experiences or value. This is the one that rarely gets talked about in finance content because it requires a degree of self-honesty that's uncomfortable. But it is everywhere. The late-night online purchase when you're stressed. The food delivery order when you're lonely and don't feel like cooking. The new outfit when you're feeling behind socially. The upgrade you didn't need, but that made you feel, briefly, like you were winning. None of these are moral failures. They're completely understandable human responses to discomfort. But when emotional spending becomes the primary relationship you have with your money, it stops being comfort and starts being a cycle. You spend to feel better. The account drops. The stress increases, which creates more pressure to spend. Understanding your own emotional spending triggers, not to judge them, but to see them clearly, is worth more than any budgeting app on the market, because no app addresses why. And why is where the pattern lives. Now, some of you are thinking, this all sounds reasonable, but I'm barely surviving. I don't have room to optimize. And I hear that. Cost of living is genuinely brutal in many places. Housing costs in major cities have outpaced wage growth for years. The math is harder for some people than others, and pretending otherwise would be dishonest. But here's what I push back on. Even under financial pressure, the order of decisions still matters enormously. Two people with identical incomes in identical cities can end up in radically different positions in 5 years, based almost entirely on the sequence and structure of their choices. Not their discipline, not their sacrifice, but their system. That's not victim blaming. That's the most hopeful version of reality available to you. Here's what I want you to take from this. The story that you're poor and that income alone is the variable that needs to change, that story keeps you passive. It puts your financial life in someone else's hands. And that's a dangerous place to wait. The alternative story is harder to sit with at first. That some of what's happening in your financial life is within your control, and that the gap between where you are and where you could be is partially explained by patterns you can actually shift. You're not failing because you're weak or irresponsible. You're failing, if you're failing, because nobody taught you the rules of a game you've been playing your whole life. That's fixable. Not overnight, not painlessly, but genuinely, practically, meaningfully fixable. And the first step is exactly what you just did. Looking at the mistakes clearly, without flinching, and deciding that knowing the truth is better than staying comfortable in the story that lets you off the hook. The money you have right now is enough to start making better decisions with. It has always been enough for that.